When Michael Jordan returned to his old high school in Wilmington and found 80-year-old Mr. Wilson, the same humble janitor who once believed in him when no one else did, still mopping the same gym floors after nearly 5 decades, his heart broke in a way he never expected. Seeing the man who had quietly opened doors for him now struggling in a rundown house with his wife in a wheelchair, Michael realized that some debts of gratitude could never be repaid with words alone. What followed was a powerful, life-changing act of kindness that didn't just transform one elderly couple's home, but healed an entire community and proved that true greatness is measured by how we lift up those who once lifted Michael Jordan, pulled into the parking lot of Emsley A. Laney High School late in the afternoon. The sun was starting to dip low over Wilmington, casting long shadows across the same pavement where he once dribbled a worn basketball as a skinny kid. At 62, his knees weren't what they used to be, but something inside him had been pulling him back here for weeks. He needed to remember where it all started. He stepped out of the black SUV, adjusted his cap, and walked through the main doors like any other visitor. The hallways were quiet now that classes had ended. Michael moved slowly, his footsteps echoing softly. He stopped in front of the big trophy case near the front office. There it was, his old jersey, newspaper clippings, and photos from his high school days. He stared at the images of his younger self, all elbows and determination. A small smile crossed his face. So much had changed, yet walking these halls made it feel like yesterday. He kept walking toward the gym, the familiar path pulling him forward. The smell hit him before he even pushed the doors open, that same mix of polished wood, sweat, and rubber. Some things never changed. Inside, the lights were dim, and only one person was there. An old man with white hair and a slight bend in his back was slowly pushing a mop across the floor near the bleachers. He moved with care, like every inch of that floor still mattered. Michael stood there for a long moment, watching. Something about the way the man worked felt so familiar. He took a few steps closer. "Mr. Wilson? Is that really you?" Michael said, his voice soft with surprise. "After all these years, you're still here, still taking care of this place." The old man looked up, squinting through tired eyes. He studied Michael's face for a second, then his expression changed. A warm, genuine smile broke across his wrinkled face. "Little Mike." "My God, look at you now," Mr. Wilson said, leaning the mop against the wall. "Some things never change, huh?" Michael stepped forward and pulled the old man into a gentle hug. Mr. Wilson felt smaller and more fragile than he remembered, but the kindness in his eyes was exactly the same. For a few seconds, neither man spoke. The empty gym seemed to hold its breath around them. In that quiet moment, Michael felt a rush of memories flood back. All the early mornings, the late nights, and the quiet belief from a man who didn't have to care. But he did. And right then, Michael knew this visit was going to be much more than just a trip down memory lane. They stood together in the quiet gym for a moment, the years melting away. Michael's mind drifted back to that painful afternoon more than 40 years ago. He had just been cut from the varsity team as a sophomore. Devastated, he stayed behind after everyone left, sitting alone in the dark gym with tears in his eyes. The sound of a bouncing ball was the only thing breaking the silence as he kept shooting free throws, refusing to go home. That's when Mr. Wilson walked in to clean up. Instead of telling him to leave, the janitor paused, listened, and quietly spoke to the coach in the hallway. Michael had overheard every word. "You told the coach he was wrong about me," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion as they stood there now. "That day I wanted to quit everything. You believed when no one else did." Mr. Wilson looked down at the gym floor for a second, then back up at Michael with a gentle smile. "I just opened a door, Mike. You were the one who walked through it." The simple words hit Michael hard, even after all this time. He remembered how Mr. Wilson had slipped him the keys to the gym that night and told him he could practice as long as he wanted, as long as he locked up. That small act of trust had changed everything. It gave a hurting kid a reason to keep going when the world felt stacked against him. Michael put a hand on the old man's shoulder. "Listen, Mr. Wilson, I'd really like to catch up properly. How about I take you to dinner after you finish your shift? Nothing fancy, just good food and conversation." Mr. Wilson chuckled softly, wiping his hands on his work shirt. "Dinner with Michael Jordan? My wife Martha won't believe this when I tell her." He paused, then nodded with a warm smile. "All right, Mike, I'd like that. Give me about 30 minutes to wrap up here." As Mr. Wilson turned back to his mop and slowly pushed it across the floor, Michael felt a deep ache settle in his chest. Watching the old man's bent back and careful steps, still working hard at 80 years old, hit him harder than he expected. This was the same man who had stayed late so many nights just so a skinny kid could keep shooting. Now here he was, still mopping the same floors after nearly 5 decades. Michael's throat tightened. It didn't feel right. A quiet anger mixed with gratitude rose inside him. He made a silent promise right then. Things were going to change for Mr. Wilson. As Mr. Wilson finished up, Michael waited by the door, his mind already racing ahead. This evening was going to be the start of something much bigger. After Mr. Wilson finished his shift, Michael took him to a simple local diner nearby. They sat in a quiet booth with red vinyl seats. Nothing fancy, just good burgers, fries, and thick chocolate milkshakes. The food was warm and comforting, exactly what they both needed. As they ate, the conversation flowed easily. Mr. Wilson asked about Michael's family and how life had been after basketball. Michael shared a few stories, but kept steering the talk back to the old days at Laney High. He wanted to hear about the kids Mr. Wilson had watched grow up over the years and the little things he did to help them. "That day, I wanted to quit everything. You believed when no one else did," Michael said quietly between bites. "It meant more than you know." Mr. Wilson smiled and shrugged. "I just opened a door, Mike. You were the one who walked through it." They laughed about old memories and finished their meal in comfortable silence. Michael paid the bill despite Mr. Wilson's protest, then insisted on driving him home. The old man gave directions to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of town. As they pulled up to the modest single-story house, Michael noticed the peeling paint and the sagging porch right away. Mr. Wilson seemed a little embarrassed, but still proud as he invited Michael inside. The living room was small and neat, but it was clear the house had seen better days. Martha was waiting in her wheelchair near the doorway. Her silver hair was neatly combed, and her eyes lit up when she saw her husband walk in with Michael. The narrow hallways, the converted dining room with a hospital bed, and the thin mattress on the floor told the whole story without anyone saying a word. "It's so good to meet you, Mrs. Wilson," Michael said warmly, shaking her hand. "Please, call me Martha," she replied with a kind smile. They sat and talked for a while, sharing memories and catching up. At one point, Martha reached for her glass of water on the side table. Her hand shook slightly as she tried to grab it. The glass slipped and fell to the floor, water spilling everywhere. Mr. Wilson was there in an instant, gently kneeling to clean it up without a word of complaint. Michael watched the whole thing in silence. His heart broke, seeing their quiet dignity. These two elderly people were struggling every single day, yet they still smiled at each other with so much love. The narrow doorways that made it hard for Martha's wheelchair, the worn-out furniture, and that thin mattress on the floor. It all hit him at once. "We've managed," Martha said, her voice trembling a little as she looked at Michael. "James always says as long as we have each other, it's enough." Michael swallowed hard, his eyes softening. "You gave me hope when I had none," he said softly. "Now let me give some back." The words hung in the air. Mr. Wilson looked up from cleaning the spill, surprised. Michael sat there, taking in the small, tired house around him, and felt a strong decision forming inside. He wasn't just going to leave things like this. Not after everything this family had done for him all those years ago. Michael left the Wilson house a little after midnight. As he drove away through the quiet streets, a heavy mix of emotions settled over him. He kept seeing Mr. Wilson's gentle smile and Martha's tired but grateful eyes. The image of that thin mattress on the floor wouldn't leave his mind. His eyes stung as he gripped the steering wheel tighter. He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice the stop sign coming up. At the last second, he hit the brakes, but it was too late. His SUV bumped lightly into the back of another car, stopped at the intersection. The collision was minor, but the jolt snapped Michael back to reality. He touched his forehead where it had hit the steering wheel and felt a small cut. A little blood came away on his fingers. The other driver, an older man, got out looking concerned. Michael apologized and exchanged information, assuring him everything was fine. He refused to make a big deal out of it. Sitting back in his car afterward, he looked at the small scratch in the rearview mirror and let out a long breath. Even a short moment of distraction had reminded him how quickly life could change. He couldn't waste any more time. Back in his hotel room, Michael still couldn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the photos of the Wilson house he had taken earlier. The cracked walls, narrow doorways, and worn furniture kept flashing through his mind. He picked up his phone and started making calls. He reached out to his business manager, his lawyer, and a trusted contractor. His voice was calm but determined as he explained the plan. Everything had to stay completely secret. "This isn't charity," he said firmly during one of the calls. "This is closing a circle that started 40 years ago." As the night went on, the pieces of his secret mission began falling into place. The minor accident earlier only made his resolve stronger. He knew he had to act fast. By the time the sky started to lighten outside his window, Michael felt a deep sense of purpose. He touched the small scratch on his forehead again and smiled quietly to himself. When he saw Mr. Wilson next, he would have a story to tell, and a whole new chapter ready to begin for the man who had once opened a door for him. The next morning, Michael drove back to the Wilson house. When Mr. Wilson opened the door, both he and Martha immediately noticed the small cut on Michael's forehead. "Oh my goodness, Mike. What happened to your head?" Martha asked, her voice full of worry. She rolled her wheelchair closer to get a better look. Mr. Wilson's eyes widened with concern. "Did you get into an accident? Sit down. Let me get something to clean that up." Michael smiled softly, feeling a warm rush in his chest from their genuine care. "It's nothing serious," he said. "I got a little distracted driving last night and bumped into another car. Just a small scratch. I'm okay, really." Martha still looked troubled. "You have to be more careful. We worry about you, even if you're a big famous man now." Mr. Wilson nodded in agreement, gently patting Michael's shoulder. Their simple, heartfelt concern made Michael feel deeply moved and even more sure about what he was planning to do. After they calmed down, Michael sat with them in the living room and brought up his idea. "I've been thinking," he said. "I'm putting together a small reunion at a beach house this weekend. Some old teammates, Principal Jenkins, Coach Thompson, and a few teachers who were at Laney when I was there will be coming. It would mean the world to me if both of you could join us as my special guests. Everything is already arranged. The house is fully wheelchair accessible, transportation is taken care of, and you won't have to lift a finger." Martha's eyes lit up with excitement for the first time in years. She looked at her husband hopefully, gently squeezing his hand. Mr. Wilson hesitated, clearly touched but unsure. "You don't have to do all this for an old janitor, Mike." Michael leaned forward and looked him straight in the eyes. "You stopped being just a janitor the day you believed in a broken kid." The words landed softly between them. Mr. Wilson's eyes grew misty. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. "If it means that much to you, then we'll go. Martha hasn't had a real vacation in a very long time." Martha smiled brightly and wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "I'd love to see the ocean again," she said quietly. Michael felt a wave of relief. The gentle deception was working. While the Wilsons enjoyed a peaceful week by the beach, his team would have time to completely transform their home. He stayed a little longer, helping them pack a few things and making sure they felt comfortable with the plan. As he left their house that afternoon, Michael glanced back at the tired little home. The small cut on his forehead was still there, but now it carried a different meaning, a reminder of the love and care he had just received. He got into his car with a determined heart. This trip wasn't just a vacation. It was the beginning of a new life for two people who had given so much and asked for so little. On Friday morning, Michael stood in the driveway and watched the accessible van pull away with the Wilsons inside. Scottie Pippen had volunteered to ride with them to the beach house to keep them comfortable and distracted. As soon as the van disappeared around the corner, Michael gave the signal. Within minutes, trucks and vans filled the street. Dozens of workers poured out, unloading tools, materials, and equipment. The quiet little house was suddenly alive with purpose. Michael rolled up his sleeves, grabbed a pair of work gloves, and jumped right in with the crew. He helped carry out old furniture, tear up worn carpet, and clear the narrow hallways. The work was hard and sweaty, but it felt good. For the first time in years, Michael wasn't thinking about business deals or public appearances. He was focused on something real. As they worked, neighbors started showing up with drinks and snacks. One older woman from across the street, wiping tears as she spoke, said, "When my husband was dying of cancer, James came over every single morning for 3 months. He helped me get him out of bed, bathed him, and sat with him so I could get some rest. Never asked for a thank you. He just said, 'We're neighbors. That's what we do.'" Another neighbor, a middle-aged man, added while helping carry drywall, "My daughter got pregnant in high school and was terrified to tell us. Mr. Wilson found her crying in the gym one night and stayed with her for hours. He helped her find the courage to talk to us. She's a nurse today with 2 beautiful kids, and she still calls him Grandpa Wilson." Michael listened to every story, his heart swelling with emotion. Each one made him more excited and deeply moved. This wasn't just one man helping a few kids. Mr. Wilson had been quietly holding up an entire community for decades. The respect and love people had for him was real and lasting. The crew worked with extra heart because of it. By the end of the first day, the old roof was partially removed, the narrow hallways were opened up, and the house was gutted and ready for real change. Michael stood in the middle of the half-torn living room, covered in dust, and felt something powerful. This was more than fixing a house. It was repaying a debt that could never truly be measured. He wiped the sweat from his brow, right above the small cut on his forehead, and smiled to himself. The Wilsons had no idea what was coming, but they would soon. By the second day, word had quietly spread through the neighborhood. People started showing up at the Wilson house with tools, food, and offers to help. What began as Michael's private project was slowly turning into something bigger, a community coming together. Neighbors carried in trays of sandwiches and cold drinks for the workers. Others rolled up their sleeves and joined in the work. As they painted walls, laid new flooring, and installed wider doorways, the stories about Mr. Wilson kept coming. One older woman brought homemade cookies and shared how Mr. Wilson had quietly paid for her grandson's school supplies when money was tight. Another man told the crew how Mr. Wilson fixed his car late at night so he could get to work the next morning. The kindness stretched back decades, small acts that had quietly shaped the lives of so many families on this street. The most touching moment came when an elderly widow walked up to Michael while he was helping install a new ramp. She took his hands in hers, her eyes filling with tears. "When my husband died, James mowed my lawn every week for 2 months without being asked," she said, her voice breaking. "He never said a word about it. He just showed up and did what needed to be done. That man has the biggest heart I've ever known." Michael stood there, holding her hands, and felt a powerful wave of emotion wash over him. Every story he heard brought him right back to his own past. The lonely nights in the dark gym, the quiet encouragement, the keys placed in his hand when no one else believed in him. Mr. Wilson hadn't just helped him. He had been doing this for everyone, year after year, without ever seeking credit or thanks. In that moment, Michael's eyes grew misty. His throat tightened as he realized the full impact of this one man's life. The same gentle hands that had mopped floors and opened gym doors for a struggling kid had been lifting up an entire neighborhood for nearly 50 years. The realization hit him hard. This project wasn't just about fixing a house. It was about finally saying thank you for a lifetime of unseen goodness. He hugged the widow gently and whispered, "Thank you for telling me that." Michael looked around at the growing group of volunteers working side by side and felt a strong sense of pride and purpose. The renovation was moving faster than he had hoped, and the love people had for Mr. Wilson was fueling every hammer strike and every coat of paint. He wiped his eyes quickly and smiled quietly to himself. The Wilsons were going to come home to much more than a new house. They were coming home to a community that truly saw them. While the renovation moved forward back in Wilmington, Michael joined the Wilsons at the beach house for a few days. The ocean air seemed to do them good. One quiet evening, the three of them sat on the deck watching the sunset. The sound of waves gently rolling in filled the comfortable silence. Mr. Wilson stared out at the water for a long time before he finally spoke. "Our son James Jr. is in California. Lynette's in Arizona. They've got their own lives now. Jobs, kids, bills to pay. We don't get to see them much." Martha looked down at her hands and cried softly. She didn't make a sound, just let the tears fall. Michael's heart ached watching her. Mr. Wilson reached over and took his wife's hand. His own eyes were wet as he continued. "We don't blame them. But at our age, you just want to hold your grandkids one more time." He paused, then admitted something even heavier. "Some evenings I sit on the porch waiting for the phone to ring. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't." The quiet pain in his voice hit Michael hard. These were two people who had spent their whole lives giving to others, yet their own children were far away. Michael thought about his own family and felt grateful but also deeply sorry for the Wilsons. He leaned forward and looked at them both with sincerity. "You will," Michael said gently. "You will hold your grandkids again. I promise you that." Mr. Wilson gave a small, hopeful nod. Martha wiped her tears and managed a soft smile. For the rest of the evening, the conversation stayed light, but Michael carried their words with him. The promise he had just made felt more important than ever. Back at the renovation site, the work was moving fast, but this conversation gave Michael even more determination. He wasn't just fixing their house. He was trying to heal some of the loneliness they had been carrying for years, and he was going to keep his promise. The days at the beach house passed peacefully, while back in Wilmington the renovation kicked into high gear. The team worked around the clock, and the old house was transforming faster than anyone expected. Narrow hallways were knocked out and widened so Martha's wheelchair could move freely from room to room. Michael personally helped measure and test the new doorways, imagining how happy Martha would be when she could roll through her home without struggling. The tiny old bathroom was completely rebuilt with a spacious roll-in shower, sturdy grab bars, and a comfortable seat. One worker even added a small shelf at the perfect height for Martha's favorite soaps and shampoos. In the kitchen, new counters were installed at a lower height so Martha could cook and reach the cabinets again. Michael stood there for a long moment, picturing her making breakfast for Mr. Wilson like she used to. Outside, raised garden beds were built at just the right level for her to tend flowers and vegetables from her chair. The team planted some of her favorite flowers so they would be blooming when she returned. The most emotional part for Michael was the special wooden display case built into the living room wall. It had glass doors and soft lighting made to perfectly hold Mr. Wilson's treasured scrapbooks. As Michael carefully placed the old scrapbooks inside himself, he flipped through a few pages and felt his eyes sting. Page after page of articles about his own career, carefully cut and saved by Mr. Wilson over decades. This quiet man had been cheering for him his whole life. The old sagging porch was replaced with a smooth ramp and a covered area where the couple could sit together and enjoy the yard. A new adjustable bed, big enough for both of them, was set up in the bedroom so they could finally sleep side by side again after years apart. Every nail hammered and every detail added felt deeply personal. Michael worked late into the night with the crew, his hands sore but his heart full. He kept thinking about Mr. Wilson's tired smile and Martha's quiet tears. This house was no longer just a place to survive. It was becoming a real home again, safe, comfortable, and filled with love. At the end of another long day, Michael stepped back and looked around the nearly finished house. His throat tightened with emotion. The transformation was almost complete, and he couldn't wait for the Wilsons to see what their community had done for them. This wasn't just a renovation anymore. It was a heartfelt thank you for a lifetime of quiet kindness. As the renovation entered its final stretch, Michael got a surprise visit from some old friends. Scottie Pippen and a couple of former teammates showed up at the Wilson house ready to work. They came dressed in old t-shirts and shorts, just like regular guys. "Couldn't let you do this alone, Michael," Scottie said with a grin as he grabbed a paint roller. The group jumped right in. They painted the living room walls together, laughing and joking like old times. But as the work continued, the mood became quieter and more meaningful. They gathered in the bedroom to assemble the new adjustable bed, the one where Mr. Wilson and Martha could finally sleep side by side again after years of hardship. Passing tools, tightening screws, and smoothing out the sheets, each man worked with care, as if they understood how important this moment was. Scottie paused while adjusting the bed frame and looked around the room. His voice grew softer. "Michael, I've seen you win rings, build businesses, and do a lot of big things. But this is the greatest thing I've ever seen you do." Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. Standing there covered in paint dust with his old teammates, the emotions hit him hard. These were the same guys he had battled through 6 championships with. Now they were here, sweating in an old house, helping him repay a simple janitor who once believed in a struggling kid. It reminded Michael of what really mattered in life. The teammates shared their own memories and listened to the stories about Mr. Wilson. One of them even got misty-eyed, hearing how the old man had quietly helped so many families. By the end of the day, the house felt warm and full of love. The final touches were falling into place, and the air was thick with anticipation. Michael looked around with quiet pride and deep gratitude. With his friends by his side, this mission felt complete in a way he hadn't expected. His heart was full. The Wilsons' new home was almost ready, and so was the big surprise that was coming. The big day finally arrived. Michael stood on the front walkway of the Wilson house, his heart beating fast. The entire neighborhood had gathered a short distance away, staying quiet as requested. A large red ribbon stretched across the front door, and the house looked warm and beautiful under the afternoon sun. Michael's phone buzzed. Scottie texted that they were just around the corner. A few moments later, the black accessible van turned onto the street. When it stopped in front of the house, Mr. Wilson and Martha looked out the windows with confused expressions. Scottie helped Mr. Wilson out first, then assisted Martha into her wheelchair. Both of them stared at their house in complete shock. The peeling paint was gone. The broken walkway had been replaced by a smooth, wide path with a gentle ramp. Fresh flowers bloomed in the new garden beds. What is all this?" Mr. Wilson asked, his voice shaking as he looked at the red ribbon and the crowd of neighbors. Michael stepped forward, his own emotions rising. "Welcome home," he said softly. Mr. Wilson took a few slow steps toward the house, then stopped. His legs suddenly seemed to give out as the weight of everything hit him at once. Michael moved quickly and caught him in a tight embrace. Both men held onto each other as tears streamed down their faces. Michael could feel Mr. Wilson's body trembling in his arms. The old janitor, who had given so much for so many years without ever asking for anything, was now overwhelmed with gratitude and disbelief. "I've got you," Michael whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I've got you." Martha rolled closer, tears flowing freely down her cheeks as she reached out to touch her husband's back. The three of them stayed there for a long moment, Michael still holding Mr. Wilson, the red ribbon waiting behind them, and the whole neighborhood watching with wet eyes. After a while, Michael gently helped Mr. Wilson stand steady again. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of shiny new keys. Taking Mr. Wilson's hand, he placed the keys in his palm and closed his fingers around them. "This house is yours," Michael said, his voice steady but full of feeling. "Paid for, fixed up, and ready for you both to live in comfort for the rest of your days." Mr. Wilson looked down at the keys, then back up at Michael, completely speechless. Martha covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing happily. At that moment, the neighborhood could no longer stay quiet. Everyone burst into loud applause and cheers. Neighbors clapped, whistled, and shouted words of congratulations. The sound of joy filled the street as people celebrated the couple they had loved and respected for decades. Michael stood beside the Wilsons, one arm around Mr. Wilson's shoulders, watching the outpouring of love. His heart felt fuller than it had in years. This was more than a homecoming. It was a true celebration of a lifetime of quiet kindness finally being recognized. The Wilsons were finally home, and they were surrounded by the love they deserved. After the emotional moment outside, Michael gently guided the Wilsons toward the front door. He cut the big red ribbon himself and pushed the door open wide, stepping aside so they could enter first. Mr. Wilson and Martha crossed the threshold together, their eyes wide with disbelief. The moment Martha rolled her wheelchair inside, her hands flew to her mouth. The narrow, difficult hallways were gone. Everything felt open, bright, and easy to move through. Michael walked beside them, quietly pointing out the changes. "The doors are all wider now. The floors are smooth, so your wheelchair can go anywhere." Martha rolled slowly from room to room, touching the walls and counters with trembling hands. She entered the kitchen and opened the lowered cabinets without any effort. Tears started streaming down her face as she realized what this meant. "I can reach everything," Martha said, sobbing with joy. "I can finally move freely in my own home." She rolled into the living room next and saw the beautiful display case glowing softly with Mr. Wilson's scrapbooks inside. Then she went down the hallway to the new bathroom and the bedroom. Every corner brought fresh tears. For the first time in years, she could move around her house independently and with dignity. Mr. Wilson followed closely, his hand resting on the back of her wheelchair. When they reached the bedroom and saw the large adjustable bed made for both of them, his shoulders began to shake. He turned to Michael, his voice breaking with emotion. "Mike, you didn't just fix a house, you gave us our lives back." Michael's eyes welled up as he looked at the couple. Seeing Martha cry happy tears and Mr. Wilson overcome with gratitude filled his heart in a way nothing else ever had. All the long nights, the planning, the hard work, it was all worth it for this exact moment. He put one arm around Mr. Wilson and gently touched Martha's shoulder. "This is how it always should have been," he said softly. "You both deserve to live comfortably and happily in your own home." The three of them stood together in the middle of the transformed living room. Outside, the neighbors were still cheering, but inside, it was just pure, quiet joy. Michael felt a deep peace settle over him. The Wilsons had finally walked through their new door, and it was only the beginning. After the Wilsons had a chance to walk through every room and let the reality sink in, Michael led them to the dining table where a folder waited. The three of them sat down together. Martha's eyes were still red from happy tears, and Mr. Wilson kept looking around the house as if he couldn't believe it was real. "There's more," Michael said gently, sliding the folder toward them. "This isn't just about the house." He opened the folder and explained everything one by one. The mortgage on the house had been paid off in full. A trust fund had been set up that would provide them with a steady monthly income for the rest of their lives. All of Martha's medical expenses, therapy, medicine, and equipment would be completely covered. Mr. Wilson listened in stunned silence. When Michael finished speaking, the old man's legs gave out. He slowly dropped to his knees on the new hardwood floor, overcome with emotion. Tears rolled down his face as he looked up at Michael. Michael's heart clenched. He immediately stepped forward, knelt down, and gently lifted Mr. Wilson back to his feet. "No man who opened doors for others should ever kneel," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "Stand with me as equals." He held Mr. Wilson's shoulders firmly, looking him straight in the eyes. Martha reached out and took both of their hands, crying softly beside them. "I don't know how to thank you," Mr. Wilson whispered, his voice breaking. "This is too much." "It's not too much," Michael replied softly. "It's what you deserve. You believed in me when I was nobody. You helped so many kids in this town for almost 50 years. Now it's time for you and Martha to live without worry." The room fell quiet, except for the soft sound of Martha's happy tears. Michael felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He had given them financial security, but more importantly, he had given them freedom. Freedom from fear, from struggle, and from wondering how they would survive. Mr. Wilson pulled Michael into another hug, holding him tight. In that embrace, decades of gratitude flowed between them. The gifts went far beyond the walls of the house. They were gifts of dignity, peace, and a future the Wilsons no longer had to fear. Michael knew in his heart that this was one of the most important things he had ever done. As the afternoon sun warmed the front yard, the gathering turned into a beautiful, unplanned celebration. Neighbors brought out chairs, and someone set up a small microphone. What began as a simple homecoming became a heartfelt community ceremony honoring Mr. Wilson. One by one, people stepped forward to share their stories. A middle-aged woman went first, her voice shaking with emotion. "When I was a senior, my family lost everything. Mr. Wilson noticed I was wearing the same clothes every day. He quietly bought me a new outfit for graduation so I wouldn't feel ashamed walking across the stage." She paused, wiping her tears. "I never got to properly thank you back then. So thank you, Mr. Wilson. You gave me my dignity." The crowd murmured with warmth, and many nodded, their eyes glistening. Next, a man in his 40s stepped up. "Mr. Wilson fixed my mom's car late at night so she could get to her night shift. He never charged her a dime. That car kept our family fed during the hardest year of our lives." His voice cracked as he spoke. The people around him clapped softly, many with tears in their eyes. Then a young boy, about 12 years old, walked up shyly. "You believed in me when I got cut from the basketball team last year," he said. "You told me not to give up and that real champions keep trying. I made the team this season because of you." Mr. Wilson hugged the boy tightly as the crowd let out a loud, warm cheer. Many parents in the audience were visibly moved, some openly crying. Story after story continued, each one revealing another layer of Mr. Wilson's quiet kindness. With every speech, the emotion in the yard grew stronger. People hugged each other, wiped tears, and smiled through the memories. Finally, the Laney High School band began to play a joyful school song. The music swelled, and the entire crowd erupted into loud cheers and applause. Neighbors clapped, whistled, and chanted Mr. Wilson's name with genuine love and respect. Michael stood a little to the side, watching it all with a full heart. Seeing grown adults cry, children smile with admiration, and the whole neighborhood come together filled him with deep satisfaction. This was more than he had imagined. Mr. Wilson stood with Martha beside him, looking overwhelmed but deeply happy. The cheers grew even louder as people continued to hug them and shake their hands. In that moment, the community had spoken loud and clear, honoring a man who had spent his life opening doors for others without ever asking for recognition. The celebration felt like a long overdue thank you that touched every single person there. As the cheering slowly faded, Michael stepped forward with the microphone. The crowd grew quiet, sensing that something even bigger was about to be revealed. The afternoon sun cast a golden light over the yard, making the moment feel almost sacred. I want to share one last thing with all of you, Michael said, his voice warm but serious. Mr. Wilson didn't just help me when I was a lost kid. He helped thousands of students over nearly 50 years. And he wasn't alone. There are thousands of janitors, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and support staff across this country who show up every single day, often unnoticed, and quietly change young lives. He paused, letting his words sink in. Many people in the crowd nodded, their eyes already misty. That's why I've created the James Wilson Foundation. A wave of surprised gasps and whispers spread through the neighborhood. Mr. Wilson's mouth fell open in shock. Martha squeezed his hand tightly, her eyes wide with emotion. Michael continued, his voice growing stronger. This foundation will offer scholarships, emergency financial assistance, and real recognition to school support staff all across the nation. These are the people who keep our schools running, who stay late to help struggling kids, and who often go unseen. Today, we start changing that. He turned directly to Mr. Wilson, his expression full of respect and affection. And Mr. Wilson, I'd like to offer you the role of honorary director. Mr. Wilson stood frozen, completely overwhelmed. Tears welled up in his eyes as the weight of the moment hit him. Michael stepped closer and spoke from the heart. You opened doors for thousands of kids. Now the world will open doors for people like you. The crowd erupted into thunderous applause. Many people were openly crying. Teachers hugged each other, parents wiped tears, and former students cheered loudly. The love and pride in the air were palpable. Martha was crying happy tears beside her husband, her hand over her heart. Mr. Wilson looked at Michael, then at all the faces in the crowd, his lips trembling. For a man who had spent his life working quietly in the background, being honored in this way was almost too much to take in. Michael placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You don't have to answer right now, but I hope you'll say yes. This foundation needs your heart, your wisdom, and the example you've set for all of us. In that powerful moment, the entire community felt the deep meaning behind the foundation. It wasn't just about money or recognition. It was about finally seeing and honoring the unsung heroes who had been changing lives in silence for generations. Mr. Wilson looked at Michael with profound gratitude. The circle of kindness that began decades ago in a dark high school gym was now growing into something much larger, something that would touch countless lives for years to come. As the celebration continued in the front yard, Michael had one more surprise prepared. He had been quietly arranging it for days. A car pulled up near the house. Two people stepped out, a man in his 50s and a woman a few years younger. It was James Jr. and Lynette, the Wilsons' son and daughter. Mr. Wilson froze when he saw them. Martha let out a soft cry and covered her mouth with both hands as tears instantly filled her eyes. The children walked forward slowly at first, then broke into a run. The family came together in a tight, emotional group hug right in the middle of the yard. Years of distance, missed calls, and quiet longing melted away in that single embrace. All four of them cried openly, deep, shaking sobs mixed with laughter. James Jr. pulled back slightly, his face wet with tears. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Dad, Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, choking on the words. "We got so caught up in our own lives. I regret every missed birthday, every holiday, every time you needed us, and we weren't there." Mr. Wilson looked at his son with nothing but love and forgiveness in his eyes. He pulled him into another tight hug, holding him close. "All I ever wanted was to see you happy," Mr. Wilson whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "That's all I've ever wanted for both of you." Lynette hugged her mother tightly, sobbing into her shoulder. "Mom, I'm here now. I promise I'll visit more. I've missed you both so much." One especially touching moment came when James Jr. knelt down in front of his father, just like he did as a little boy. "I want to make up for lost time, Dad. I want my kids to know their grandparents." Mr. Wilson placed his hands on his son's shoulders and helped him stand, pulling him into another heartfelt embrace. Another beautiful moment happened when Lynette placed her phone in her mother's hands and showed her live video of her own children, the Wilsons' grandchildren, waving and calling out, "Grandma! Grandpa!" Martha cried even harder, laughing through her tears as she blew kisses at the screen. The neighbors watched with warm smiles, and many wiped their own tears. The reunion felt like the final missing piece of a long broken puzzle. For years, the Wilsons had carried a quiet ache for their distant children. Now that ache was being healed in the most beautiful way. Michael stood back, watching the family with a full heart. This was the promise he had made to them on the beach, and he was glad he could deliver it. The Wilsons stayed wrapped in their family hug for a long time, laughing, crying, and talking all at once. The yard was filled with joy, applause, and the beautiful sound of a family finally coming back together. For Michael, seeing this moment made everything, every plan, every late night, and every effort completely worth it. The house was new, the future was secure, and now the family was whole again. As the celebrations slowly wound down, the Wilson house filled with even more warmth. James Jr. and Lynette had decided to stay the night along with their families. For the first time in many years, the entire Wilson family was together under one roof. In the late afternoon and early evening, laughter echoed through the new home. The grandchildren, 4 in total, ran around exploring every corner with wide-eyed excitement. Mr. Wilson sat on the couch with his 2 grandsons on his lap, telling them old stories from his time at Laney High. The boys listened with rapt attention, hanging on every word. "Daddy said you used to open the gym early for Michael Jordan," one of the boys said. "Is that true, Grandpa?" Mr. Wilson smiled proudly. "It is. That boy worked harder than anyone I've ever seen." In the kitchen, Martha was in heaven. With the lowered counters, she was able to cook alongside Lynette for the first time in years. They made a simple but heartfelt dinner together while chatting and catching up on lost time. James Jr. helped set the table, stealing glances at his parents with a mixture of guilt and D. After dinner, the whole family gathered on the new porch as the sun began to set. The children played in the yard while the adults sat together. Soft jazz music played gently in the background. Martha held her husband's hand and looked at their children and grandchildren with tears of joy in her eyes. "We've never been richer than we are right now," she said softly. James Jr. leaned forward, his voice thick with emotion. "Mom, Dad, I promise we're going to do better. No more missing holidays, no more being too busy. We want our kids to know you both." Lynette nodded, wiping her eyes. "I've missed this so much. I've missed you." Mr. Wilson smiled warmly, his arm around Martha. "All we ever wanted was to see you happy and know that you're okay. Having you all here tonight, this is the best gift we could ever receive." The grandchildren ran up onto the porch, climbing into their grandparents' laps. One little girl hugged Martha tightly and said, "Grandma, your new house is so pretty. Can we come visit every summer?" Martha laughed through happy tears and kissed the top of her head. "Of course, sweetheart. This house is always open for all of you." As the sky turned dark and the stars came out, the big family sat together on the porch, talking, laughing, and making new memories. The new porch swing rocked gently. The raised garden beds waited quietly for tomorrow. And inside the house, the lights glowed warmly. For Mr. Wilson and Martha, this was more than just their first night in their new home. It was the first night of a new chapter, one filled with family, love, and the beautiful feeling of being surrounded by the people who mattered most. They had never felt richer, and their hearts had never been fuller. Later that evening, after they had taken a slow tour of every room again, Mr. Wilson and Martha settled into their new living room. The soft lighting from the special display case glowed gently on the wall. Mr. Wilson noticed a brand new scrapbook placed on the coffee table. Curious, he picked it up and opened it. On the very first page was a handwritten letter from Michael. His hands trembled slightly as he began to read it aloud to Martha. Dear Mr. Wilson, you believed in me before the world did. When I was a skinny kid who got cut from the team and wanted to quit, you opened a door for me, not just to the gym, but to a future I never thought was possible. Now I believe in you, and in every unsung hero like you. Thank you for showing me what real strength and kindness look like. This house, the foundation, and everything we've done is my way of saying thank you. You've spent your life opening doors for others. It's time someone opened doors for you. With deepest gratitude and respect, Michael. By the time he finished reading, both Mr. Wilson and Martha were crying. Mr. Wilson's voice broke several times as he read the words. Martha held his arm tightly, tears streaming down her face. When he finished, they sat in silence for a moment, letting the letter sink in. He really sees us, Martha whispered, her voice full of emotion. He understands everything we've been through. Mr. Wilson nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. All these years I thought I was just doing my job, just being a decent person. I never imagined someone like Michael would remember, let alone do all this for us. He carefully placed the letter back in the scrapbook and closed it gently, as if it were something precious. Then he pulled Martha closer and held her. I don't have the words to describe how I feel, he said quietly. Grateful doesn't seem big enough. Martha rested her head on his shoulder. We've been given so much more than a house tonight. We've been given hope, dignity, and the knowledge that our life mattered. The couple sat together in the soft glow of the living room, the new scrapbook resting between them. Outside, the neighborhood had grown quiet. Inside, their hearts were full. This letter wasn't just words on paper. It was a heartfelt thank you from one life to another, a beautiful reminder that kindness, no matter how quiet, is never forgotten. And on this peaceful night, in their new home, Mr. Wilson and Martha felt truly seen, truly loved, and truly blessed. A few weeks later, Mr. Wilson returned to Laney High School. But this time, everything was different. He no longer wore his old work uniform. Instead, he walked through the familiar hallways in a nice button-up shirt, moving with a quiet confidence he hadn't felt in years. Students and teachers greeted him warmly as he made his way to the gym. Today, he wasn't there to mop floors. He was there as a storyteller and mentor for the James Wilson Foundation. A group of students, some athletes, some who struggled with school, and some who just needed someone to listen, sat on the bleachers waiting for him. Mr. Wilson stood in front of them with a gentle smile. I spent 47 years working in this school, he began, his voice warm and steady. I wasn't a teacher, I wasn't a coach, I was the janitor, but I saw every one of you, and I want you to know that your story matters. He shared simple but powerful stories about hard work, believing in yourself, and helping others even when no one is watching. The students listened intently. Some nodded with understanding, others had tears in their eyes. One teenage girl raised her hand. Did you really know Michael Jordan when he was our age? Mr. Wilson chuckled. I did. He was a skinny kid who got cut from the team, but he kept showing up. That's what I want you all to remember. Sometimes the greatest victories start with getting back up after you've been knocked down. From the sidelines of the gym, Michael watched proudly. He stood quietly near the doors, arms crossed, a soft smile on his face. Seeing Mr. Wilson in front of the students, sharing wisdom and encouragement, filled him with deep pride and joy. This was exactly what he had hoped for. After the session ended, Mr. Wilson noticed Michael standing there. He walked over slowly, and the two men shared a warm handshake. Look at you, Michael said with a grin. You're not done changing lives yet. Mr. Wilson laughed softly. I guess not, and I have you to thank for that. They stood together for a moment, looking out at the empty gym where their story had begun so many years ago. Now, a new chapter was unfolding, one where Mr. Wilson's lifetime of quiet kindness would continue to inspire the next generation. Michael put a hand on his shoulder. "You belong here, not as the janitor, but as the man who opens doors for these kids, just like you did for me." Mr. Wilson nodded, his eyes shining with purpose. For the first time in decades, he felt truly valued for everything he had given. This was his new chapter, and it felt exactly right. A few months later, on a quiet afternoon, Michael returned to Laney High School. He walked down the familiar hallway and pushed open the gym doors. The familiar smell of polished wood and rubber greeted him once again. In the middle of the court stood Mr. Wilson, talking gently to a young boy who sat on the bottom bleacher with his head down. The boy had just been cut from the varsity team. His eyes were red and his shoulders slumped with the same heavy disappointment Michael once felt many years ago. Michael stayed back near the doorway, watching with a full heart. Mr. Wilson sat down beside the boy and spoke to him softly, the same way he had once spoken to a skinny sophomore who wanted to quit. After a few minutes, Mr. Wilson reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys, the keys to the gym. He placed them carefully into the boy's hand and said with deep kindness, "Sometimes all you need is one person to open the door." The boy looked up, gripping the keys tightly. A small spark of hope returned to his eyes as he stood up and walked toward the court. Michael stepped forward from the shadows, smiling. He walked over and put his arm around Mr. Wilson's shoulders. "And today," Michael said warmly, looking at both Mr. Wilson and the young boy, "that door stays open for all of us." The three of them stood together in the same gym where their shared story had begun so many years earlier. The sound of the basketball bouncing echoed through the empty space as the boy took his first shots with renewed determination. Mr. Wilson had come full circle. The man who once quietly opened doors for others now had a foundation carrying his name, helping support staff and students across the country. And here he was, still doing what he had always done best, giving a struggling kid a chance. Michael looked at his old mentor with deep respect and love. What started as a simple visit home had grown into something far greater, a legacy of kindness, belief, and second chances that would continue long after both of them were gone. As the boy kept shooting, determined to prove himself, Michael and Mr. Wilson shared a quiet, meaningful smile. Some doors, the most important ones, would never close. In the years that followed, the James Wilson Foundation grew far beyond what anyone imagined. Hundreds of school support staff across the country received help when they needed it most. Medical bills paid, homes repaired, and most importantly, their dignity restored. Mr. Wilson continued visiting Laney High School as a mentor until the day he could no longer walk the halls. But his spirit lived on in every student who was told, "Never give up, someone believes in you." As for Michael Jordan, he often said that helping the Wilsons was one of the most meaningful things he had ever done in his life, not because of the money or the publicity, but because it reminded him of a simple truth he learned as a young man. The greatest victories aren't the championships we win on the court, but the lives we touch and the doors we open for others. And so, the story of Michael Jordan and Mr. Wilson became more than just a tale of fame and gratitude. It became a quiet reminder for all of us. Be kind. Open doors. Believe in someone when they need it most. Because one day, that someone may become the person who changes the world, or the person who simply helps another soul find their way home. In the end, it's never about how high we fly. It's about how many people we lift up along the way.